You are listening to Brand Me, Alex Merced, with me, Alex Merced. On this show, we'll be talking about the ins and outs of branding and how to empower yourself by defining yourself. We'll talk about the tools, the methods, the strategies, so that way you can take a brand to achieve your goals in your personal life, your professional life, in all of your life. If you need help implementing these ideas and using these tools to achieve your goals, contact Alex Merced to be your branding coach by heading over to mercedbranding.com.
Hey, everybody, this is Alex Merced, and you're listening to Brand Me, Alex Merced, the podcast about branding, about developing your personal brand and learning all the different ways to kind of communicate your brand with more and more people. Now, bottom line is the first step before we even try to design the brand and whatnot, there's a couple of pieces we got to kind of figure out. We got to figure out what are we trying to do here. Because if you design a brand just because, hey, this seems like a good idea, but you're not sure what you're trying to do with that brand, then you're going to end up not communicating the things you need to get your target audience to take the actions you want them to take. So first we're going to determine what our goals are. Then we'll talk about sort of figuring out who the right audience to achieve that goal is. And then we can actually design a brand. So these are just basic marketing concepts. The idea of just basically, marketing communications, which branding is. It's a type of marketing communication where you're basically trying to create sort of an identity. It only works if you're saying the right things to the right people. Okay, it's not like there's some magic that the magic of marketing isn't that there's some magical way that you say things that makes anybody do the things that you want. It's about identifying the people who already want to do the things you want them to do and be able to communicate to them better than anyone else to do that thing that they already want to do. So first we got to figure out what your goal is. Like, let's say your goal is to be a public speaker. Okay, so that's going to be a different goal than if your goal is to get hired or your goal is to sell a particular product. So we got to figure out what it is that you're trying to do. So let's take those three particular goals and kind of assess them one by one. So you want to be a public speaker. So basically, there's a couple things you need to kind of establish in a brand that's a public speaker. Not just expertise, but also charisma. Really, charisma and expertise. Because there's a lot of people who know a lot of stuff about a lot of things that people do not want to hear talk. Okay, so you got to be able to be humorous. So you got to develop the brand that identifies you not only as an expert, okay, in the area that you're an expert in, but two, someone who has the charisma and ability to communicate that. Okay, and that's gonna determine sort of how we communicate. How do we get that word out there? Okay, so we may decide down the road, we may use more mediums where people can hear you speak in order to get that message out there that you are a charismatic speaker and an expert. Okay, which is different than if you're just looking to get hired as an expert to do a function. So if you're looking to be hired to be a physicist, not a public speaker about physics, then it's just a matter of being able to communicate your expertise. So doing things that require you to speak, like a podcast or videos, will play less of a role. They may play a role, but they're less. They're going to play, the quality of your ability to speak is going to be less. You might care more about blogging and just basically being able to communicate what you know. But again, your ability to speak becomes less important. The ability to communicate charisma becomes less important. So again, getting hired, the idea is really just you're just trying to communicate pure expertise. Now, if you're trying to sell a product, okay, then it goes a little bit differently. Not only do we need to establish expertise, but we need to establish authenticity in the sense that not people out there know that you know what you're talking about, but they have to trust you because you're going to be telling them that, hey, I know a lot about this thing and I want you to take X action to purchase my product, and you have to sort of build that relationship. So basically, creating a consistent communication, and a communication that kind of breeds warmth and trust is going to make a big difference in communicating, and also communicating that the product works. But that's also part of the branding of the product, separate than building your personal brand. So your personal brand has to be an expert who is trustworthy, and then the product's brand has to be sort of that it's a product that that solves a problem that's sort of congruent with your expertise and all that stuff. So again, it just depends what your goal is. So determine sort of what path are you taking. And once we kind of determine what path you are taking, we can kind of decide then who is the right audience. Because again, the audience for getting you hired are employers. And they're going to be looking for different communications, different messages than an audience who wants to be spoken to, a public speaking audience, and someone who wants to purchase a product. They may necessarily all be they may be all people who are a fan of physics, if we're just assuming this is either a physics product, physics speaker, or someone who wants to be hired by a physics department. But they're not necessarily made up of the same individuals. Okay, people who might buy a cool like physics lab kit may not be the same people who want to go to like a physics lecture, or who are looking to hire someone for their physics department. So knowing what your goal is, the action that you're trying to take, what is the goal, is going to help us be able to narrow down that audience within sort of where your expertise is. So for the next week, what I'd like you to do is just sit there and figure out what is it that you want people to do at the end of the day. Okay, whether it's to make money or not make money. So what is it that you want people to do? And if you're not looking to make money, maybe the thing you're trying to do is just get people to subscribe to your podcast, like you should be subscribing to this one. So if you're not subscribed to this one on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, you should be, and you should be telling your friends to subscribe to this podcast, because everyone could use branding knowledge. So if you enjoy what you're learning so far, tell people about the podcast. But again, sit down with like a notebook, start just jotting down what you want people to do, and just keep trying to make it more and more and more specific. Okay, it shouldn't go beyond the sentence. Basically, think about it is that the action, any kind of marketing concept should be able to be encapsulated in a tweet. So in the end, your brand should be able to be communicated in a tweet. When we're said and done, and we've kind of walked you through the steps of determining what your brand is. But right now, we want to define the desired action. So try to define a desired action. Don't go over 140 characters, but figure out what that desired action is. And then next week, we'll talk a little bit more about sort of designing your audience for your brand and going from there. So I'll see you guys next week. You guys have a great one. Enjoy. Ciao.
Thank you for listening to Brand Me, Alex Merced, on iTunes, Google Play, and Stitcher, and wherever you listen to your podcasts. Make sure to like Alex Merced on Facebook, on Twitter, and head over to mercedbranding.com to find us on social media and find other useful advice and resources in marketing and achieving your goals.